For this week's Thought of the Week, Parshas Va'era, I'd like to thank Hartley Perlmutter. So following the two initial shows of force on God's behalf by Moshe and Aaron, namely the staff turning into a snake and swallowing all the other sorcerers' snakes, and the first plague of the blood, wherein the Nile and all forms of water throughout the land of Egypt for the Egyptians turned into blood, Paro goes home and does some serious thinking. This is a serious situation. The pasuk says, "Vayifen Paro, vayavo el beso, veloshat libo gam lizot." Paro goes home, doesn't pay attention, doesn't turn his heart also to this. What is also to this? What is gam lizot? First of all, what is zot? And also what's gam in addition to this? So Rashi right away explains, he wasn't paying attention, he didn't have a change of heart after seeing both the miracle of the snakes and the miracle / plague of the blood. Tanin v'dam. The Sforno explains, he didn't notice, he wasn't able to distinguish between the wonders of God, the absolute miracle that occurred, and the sleight of hand tricks and misdirection that the performance that the necromancers, that the magicians put on. He wasn't able to see the difference. Both of these explanations, just in the pshat of the pasuk and the way the Sforno explains it, Paro had an opportunity. He had a moment of silence. He had a moment to spare to think, to reconsider, to reassess, to reevaluate his position on God, on freeing the Jews for 3 days. And he didn't take it. He didn't do tshuva. The Meshech Chochmah, the Pirkei Rabbi Lazar, explained that he actually had a lot more of a pause, a reprieve than we think, because the first plague didn't actually affect him. He went home and he saw that his house was fine. His water, his tap water, was running just fine. He had water. Why is it that Paro wasn't affected? Because, as we know, there's a midrash that says that when the Egyptians wanted to drink, because he can't live without water, and the plague went on for 7 days, they went and they had to buy from the Jews. That's how the Jews actually started to accumulate their wealth, that they left with all of the wealth at the end, eventually, but it started here. Paro, he already paid his dues, literally, by raising Moshe in his palace. He gave Moshe tons of money. So he was exempt from experiencing this pain. So Paro had a moment of reprieve that nobody else had, and he was able to look at the situation a little bit more objectively, and he wasn't able to come to the same conclusion that he would come to after 10 plagues later, and that was, let my people go, Ani Hashem. And this opportunity that Paro squandered, this moment, is the same moment that he repeatedly tried to take away from Am Yisrael. Vayhi bayamim harabim ahem, when Moshe was already in Midian for maybe even 40 years. Vayamot melech Mitzrayim, and the initial Paro that enslaved the Jews died. Vayeyanchu b'nei Yisrael min ha'avoda, vayiz'aku, and Bnei Yisrael sighed or lamented over the work, and they cried out, "Vatal shavatam el Elohim mina avoda," and their davening, their prayer, their request for salvation was answered by God. Why did it take the death of Paro, in however way you understand it? Why did it take the death of Paro to bring Yisrael to scream out to God? Explained in Netziv and the Mesilas Yesharim also. They finally had a moment. The world stopped for a day. They had to go mourn Paro. And Yisrael got to thinking. And they were reminded about God, the God of their fathers and their forefathers. And they returned to him. They cried out to him. They finally had a moment of reprieve and they turned to God. Later down the line, what does it mean when Paro says, when after Moshe and Aaron initially, the first time they come to Paro and say, "Let my people go," Paro says, what's his reaction? Tichbad ha'avoda. Let the work get harder. Va'al yishu al divrei sheker. They shouldn't start thinking about these lies, these false hopes, these aspirations. Why did he say tichbar ha'avoda? Explains in Netziv that they shouldn't be betelim, shaloyu betelim. They shouldn't have these moments to think, to turn to God. In those silences, they turn to God. Like Eliyahu was told by God that he's in the silence, not in the big fire and the big shows. He's in the silence. That's when you can turn to God. Finally, when Moshe tries to tell them at the beginning of this parsha, after Paro made it a living hell for them, velo shamu elav mikotzer ruach. Explains the Sforno, they didn't have a chance to be misbonen. They didn't have a chance to think, to meditate on the matter. Paro, who had this moment, took it away from Yisrael numerous times. The Jews used each precious moment to turn to God. Paro squandered that opportunity. It's a special power that Jews actually have to return to God, to turn to God in those moments. I find that after an argument, after a debate, I'll think after the fact, not during the fact, but after the fact. I'll look back at the conversation, at the other points, and I'll try to conflate the two. I'll try to see how the other points fit in. I'll try to see the other side. I'll try to see where I erred, my mistakes, how I can further expand my knowledge, my ideas, my approach, my stance. After those fightings, after those debates, then I can look back. I have those moments of reprieve, and I can look back and see how to fill everything in. It's like the pasuk says in Shema, "V'hayu advarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavacha hayom al levavecha." These things that I'm commanding you today, these divarim, these dibros, these mitzvos, these halachos, they should be al levavcha, on your heart, not bilevavcha, not in your heart. Because God can't expect us to love Him right away, to feel it right away. Just put it on your heart, place it on top, and let it fall in the cracks later. It'll get there one day. Just keep it there, hold it there, on top of your heart. So when you have those moments, then let it slip in. That's what Paro was missing out on. That's the opportunity he lost. Rav Kook explains very famously at the end of Brachos in Einayah, Talmidei Chachamim Marbim Shalom Ba'olam. It's our sages, those who fight and fight and fight to no end. In every generation, every stage of Torah, they argue with each other. These pairings, these chavrusas have machloksim. They're Marbim Shalom Ba'olam. They create peace, shlemus in the world. You argue and you bring peace. Explains Rav Kook. We know that Shivim Panim LeTorah, there are 70 faces, there are 70 different ways to interpret Torah. Your way, Beis Hillel says to Beis Shammai, I need your way to improve my way. I can't fully comprehend Torah, and therefore God, and therefore myself, without your understanding as well. That's the kicker. Talmidei Chachamim Marbim Shalom Ba'olam. Yeah, they argue, but they respect each other. They hear the other person out. They'll stand strong in their ideas, but they'll take into account the other side. And they certainly appreciate it, and they're certainly enhancing their own understanding by it. It's the same thing when it comes to dinim, right? It's not just deos, it's not just understandings, it's also when we judge others, and dayanim, actual judgment, seeing both sides. And when we do that, what is a dayan called? What is a judge called? V'nikra balabait el Elohim. Who is this Elohim? It's not talking about God here. It's a reference to the dayan. The dayan is godly. To be able to see both sides, to be able to see everything, the complete picture. And Moshe is also called twice. Last week's parsha and this week's parsha. You're going to be Elohim to Aaron. You're going to be Elohim to Paro. What does this mean? So the Ra'avam and the Ibn Ezra explain you are like a malach. You are like an angel. Somebody who has direct contact with God. The intermediary between God and the world. That's you, Moshe. I'll pause and I'll explain that idea a little bit more, how Moshe embodied that idea. Because, I had the question last week and this week. Once Moshe said, Shlach na b'yati shlach, send somebody else, send Aaron. I can't speak well, I don't want the kavod, I don't want the honors, I don't want to be the leader, I don't want the burden. Send Aaron. Aaron is the one who regularly does it. He speaks better than me. I don't want to take away. I don't want to steal his thunder. God acquiesces. He sends Aaron with Moshe. Why does he still need Moshe? The Malbim explains. Moshe was ready to completely nullify himself. He would not add one word to his nevuos. He was just the instrument of God. Whatever God put into his mouth, that's what came out. That's why God said, I specifically want you because you have speech impediments. When you speak clearly, everyone will know it's specifically God talking. That's the kind of intermediary Moshe was. Direct from God. Panim el panim, face to face. How did Moshe attain this level of nullification? Through self-abnegation. The Panach Razah says, when Moshe says, I have a speech impediment, what does God say? Mi sam pe la'adam. Who gives a mouth to man? The Panach Razah says in the name of the Rabbi Chor Shor, those are the Roshei Tevos. That's an acronym. Mem, Samech, Sin, Pei, Lamed is mashpel. Someone who lowers himself. Humility. That's what it takes to see the other side. To see beyond ourselves and see the other side. When it comes to understanding things, when it comes to judging things, and when it comes to judging people. Don't judge a person until you walk in his shoes, until you look at how he sees things. When we feel these intense angers, these angry moments, it's because we're thinking about ourselves, how we were hurt. And when we experience that in a relationship, we lash out based on how we feel. But we don't see how the other person will react, what they're going through, what pain they're going through. That's true love, when you can see what somebody else feels. Like the story I heard Rav Jake Wiedemlansky tell of Boris and Alexander, who were going shot for shot, and they were in their 16th shot of vodka, and after each shot in progression, Boris would turn to Alexander and say, I love you! And he would say, I love you back! 5 in, 10 in, 15 in. But by the time they got to 17 and they were out of it, Boris turns to Alexander and says, I love you! And Alexander says, no you don't! Boris says, what are you talking about? Of course I do. He says, if you love me, you would know what I'm feeling. That's what it takes to be an Elohim, to be a Malach, to be a Dayan, to see the other side. And this isn't something that just Moshe can attain. Like Rav Hirsch explains, why is it that there's an interjection of the history of Yaakov to Reuven, Shimon, Levi, to Levi's sons, to Amram, to Aaron and Moshe? Who Aaron and Moshe? These are the Aaron and Moshe that saved Am Yisrael because they're human. It's pointing out these are just human beings. Anybody could have attained this. This isn't unique to Moshe. Anybody can attain this. All it takes is that moment of silence and seeing the other side. This is what Paro gave up. This is what Am Yisrael always took. Am Yisrael, just like Moshe, are called Malachim, are called Elokim. When Hashem says, I'm going to take you out, Al Tzivotam, in their legions. What are legions? Ibn Ezra says, a Malach. What is this talking about? The idea of Tzvaot is generally referred to as like a tzava, an army. Because an army is singular, with one purpose. That's Am Yisrael. That's each and every one of us and you. The purpose of being, of carrying out God's will, of bringing glory to God's name. We can be malachim. We are malachim. All it takes is that mashpil ourselves, to look beyond ourselves. In those free moments. Not necessarily in the moment. That's a lot to ask. For sure that's the ideal. But after the fact. V'ahavta Hashem Elokecha. V'ayu hadvarim ha'ele al levavcha. Al levavcha. Let's get to that point of just putting it on our heart. That's how we reached Avas Hashem. V'ahavta et Hashem Elokecha. How? Vayud Rama'ela Alavavcha. Look past it. Later. Take a moment later down the road and consider. That we should use our 2 ears over our 1 mouth. We should see the other side, the uniqueness in the other side, the shleimus that the other side gives us. That we should judge others favorably if we want God to judge us favorably, like the Chavetz Chaim says. We should carry out God's will, bring the Geula, Mashiach, the Beis HaMikdash, from here b'yameinu. Good Shabbos.